Forge, Chapter 12. Our path took us to Kingston, the new capital city of the state of New York, rather, what was left of Kingston after the British burned it. We joined the companies cleaning out the ruin of the barrack building, dragging out half-burnt timbers and shoveling broken bits of furniture, wall, and ceiling. I tried to keep my distance from John Burns. The sergeant assigned us to different work parties, which helped, but Burns was intent in spreading his mischief. False stories about my past surfaced, and a few fellows cared to talk to me or sit near me when we stopped work for a mug of spruce beer and bread. Eben stayed a true friend, and a few others, but the poison from John Burns' twisted heart was spreading. The company added a new soldier in Kingston, one Benjamin Edwards, who hardly looked old enough to be a drummer boy, though he swore to be 15. He was a bookish lad with a face much pitted from smallpox, and he knew many stories from ancient times that he delighted in telling around the fire. John Burns disliked Edwards instantly. I couldn't figure out why. Edwards was every bit as white as Burns, and he was funny and polite if you took the time to listen to him. But Burns found something offensive about the new lad and teased him without mercy. I made a point of extending friendship towards Edwards. Sleep came hard in Kingston. I'd often crawl out of the tent and watch the stars pass overhead. One night, the northern lights blazed a brilliant blue and a ferocious green, the colors of my compass card, and with the stars pointing arrows in all directions of the sky. On our third Sunday there, we were preached by a minister who blamed the ruin of the city on our sinful souls. That did not sit well with us, but we had to listen to the whole sermon. If we walked out, the captain would have ordered a flogging. After church, we had been given a half day free. Most of the fellows went off in search for a treasure in the rubble of the ruined houses. Anything worthwhile had been sifted out long before we arrived, so I convinced Eben that we should stay by the fire and dry out our damp blankets and our coats. Sergeant Woodruff found us there and handed Eben a folded paper. "This came from New Jersey for the captain," he ordered. "He's dining at the Hardenberg's house on the Toll Road." I looked at Eben and he looked at me, and that gaping tooth grin cracked open, because we had the same thought. Colonel Hardenbaugh was said to be the richest man in the county. There was sure to be plenty of leftover grub from his dinner table, and we were sick to death of boiled beans and pork fat. "Can Curzon go with me?" Eben asked. The sergeant hesitated. "Am I requested here, sir?" I asked. "No, the day is your own." He pulled off his cap and rubbed his head. "Colonel Hardenbaugh heads up the military here. Dutch folks mostly. They're different from us and Massachusetts. Understand?" "Yes, sir," we said. "Strange bunch of bumpkins," the sergeant warned, putting on his cap again. "Let Eben do the talking. Do you grasp my meaning, Smith?" "No." Was he talking in riddles? "Of course, sir," I say. Colonel Hardenbaugh's house was big enough for 4 families, with 2 proper barns behind it, and carefully tended fields stretching in every direction. The militia had pitched their tents around the house. A couple dozen of them stood out, smoking pipes and enjoying the sun. A few held wooden plates with remains of their Sunday dinner. "Do you think we're too late for the grub?" I asked. "Maybe there's a friendly lass in the kitchen who can help us," Eben answered. "I'll find the captain and meet you in the back." I went to the door whilst I wove my way through the crowd. The talk was a mix of English and Dutch. What I could understand was all news of war. From more British ships were crossing the ocean, more Hessians being hired to kill us. One man claimed that the Spanish were about to invade us from Florida. I hurried on. The food had been served behind the house near the kitchen door, where a long board rested across the barrels. Crumbs and broken pieces of cornbread littered one end of the board. The rest was covered with dirty trenchers and bowls. An empty soup pot stood on the ground, but there, on the seat of the chair, were 3 fat slices of apple pie, waiting for the right lad to come along. The kitchen door was open. A short, round-cheeked black woman came down the steps, her hair covered with a dark blue cloth, her sleeves rolled up in an apron greasy from serving. She was not old enough to be my mother, but older than a sister would be. She smiled warmly at me and said something in Dutch to the person still in the kitchen. The door opened again, and out came the tallest man I'd ever seen, carrying 2 kettles of steaming water. He set one on the board and poured the second one into the empty soup pot. Then he kissed the woman on the forehead. I knew he must be her husband. I nodded politely. "Good day." The woman chuckled. "What will je block?" "Pardon me." "Je will tart evnit. Je mister vo je niet go als ik zo maar niet kill." I'm sorry, I don't understand, ma'am. She has no English, the tall man said, but I do. I'm Bumfrey, Min Vraw. She is Bet. You? I am Curzon. Pleased to meet you. And your lady, I bowed. He is my Jengorgen e J Te into Moten. That sounds friendly enough. I pointed to the pie that made a motion of showing I wanted to eat it. The woman shook her head and spoke quickly. For soldiers, the man's translated. No you, no me, no Bet. I struggled to figure the meaning. Soldiers, he repeated. I am a soldier. I patted my chest. Me, soldier. I played at an aiming a musket and firing it. Pachoo! You, the man said. Soldier? The barrel-bellied old white man with a well-coiffured wig and a red silk waistcoat and a lace neckcloth stepped carefully down the steps, leaning on his cane and wincing. When he saw me, he spoke loud and fast in Dutch to Bumfrey. The tall man shook his head and answered in a soft voice. Bet watched the exchange, her face weary. The old fellow pointed his cane at me. My man here says that you're pretending to be a soldier. His English was clear, but spiced with a Dutch flavor. Tell your master it's up to him to feed you, not me. And then I knew Colonel Hardenbaugh owned Bumfrey, and he owned Bet. He thought me of a slave, too, for my skin was darker than theirs. Eben came around the corner whistling. Any luck? He asked me. Your boy claims he's a soldier, Hardenbaugh said. Take him away from here. Sir? Eben asked. Hardenbaugh's face flushed. I won't have him stirring up my N-word. He turned back to us and spat out angrily, Dutch at Bumfrey and Bet. Bumfrey tried to get in a word, his explanation mayhaps, but the colonel cut him off. With respect, sir, you are an heir. Eben tried again. Hush, I grabbed Eben's elbow. We have to go. No, he shook me off. I'll explain, and then we'll get that pie. We deserve it after the miles we walked. A pox in the pie, I said. The colonel's face grew redder and redder as he yelled. Bet glanced at me and then plunged the dirty plates into the kettle of water. Bumfrey stood still as a tree, but his clenched jaw gave him away. He was thinking of how to revenge himself on Hardenbaugh. For each thought of revenge, he'd have another of fear, for if it outlashed, his master could make him and Bet suffer. So he could do nothing. Neither could I, which shamed me and kindled my rage. In the same breath, I turned on my heel and stalked away. Hey, Eben called. Ho there, wait! I fought through the crowd of militia, bumping into as many men as I could without begging pardon, hoping that some god some lout into fighting me so I could hit and draw blood to silence the thunder in my head. They were just stepping to the side and continued conversating, pipe smoke and laughing. At the road, I broke into a slow run. Eben didn't catch up to me for more than a mile. Then I stopped at the crossroads. What was that all about? He bent over, his hands on his knees, and panted like an overworked ox. The captain told me flat out that we could have the pie. And there you go, insulting the colonel and knocking through the militia like they're the enemy. Have your wits cracked? Leave me alone, I said, and walked away. The fool followed me. Were you rude to the colonel's cook? Uncle says womenfolk need polite and proper handling, all of them. A man who treats a lady low. I don't want to talk about this, I said harshly. He walked so close, his clumsy feet stepped on mine. That old colonel looked ready to give you what for. You better not have any of his spoons in your boots. I covered for you once, but I can't do it again. Uncle Caleb has been prickly as of late. He'll think I had a hand in your thievery. And don't you ever shut up. I wheeled around to face him in the middle of the road. I was not flirting with the cook. That plaguey lump of a colonel assumed that I was a slave and chased me off the way you would chase off a dog. Eben stopped walking and frowned. Why didn't you just explain? Don't be stupid. He's not the type that's going to listen to black people. That dastard thinks that I'm no better than his goat. Surely that wasn't his intention. Of course it was his intention. It's why Burns is after me and why your plaguey uncle gives me the worst duties. Half of the fellows in our company don't think I belong here. I do. Eben shuffled his boots back and forth and wheeled the rut in the road. It hurt, the hurt in his eyes stopped me. He had been kind to me in his jabber-mouthed way, but how deep did his kindness go? How much could I trust him? Let me ask you something. We're fighting for freedom, right? I picked my words carefully. So why is that man allowed to own Bumfrey and Bet? Well, he said slowly, we're fighting for our freedom, not theirs. He crossed his arms, uncrossed them, put his hands on his belt, and crossed his arms again. Nobody in my family owns slaves, you know. That's not the point. Do you think only white people can be free? Of course not. There are plenty of free blacks, like you and the other fellows in Saratoga and Albany. We had a family 2 villages over from mine. They were all free black people. But the colonel's slaves aren't allowed to be free. He frowned. They can't be free, Curzon. They're slaves. Their master decides for them. What if they ran away? Then they'd be breaking the law. Bad laws deserve to be broken. Don't talk like that. He kicked a rock deep in the field. You want to get in trouble? Laws have to be followed or else you go to jail. What if the king made bad laws, laws so unnatural that the country broke them by declaring its freedom? He threw his arms in the air. Now you're spouting nonsense. 2 slaves running away from their rightful master is not the same as America wanting to be free from England. It's not the same at all. How is it then that the British offer freedom to escaped slaves, but the Patriots don't? How am I supposed to know that? The wind had come up whilst we argued, before Eben could say anything else. It blew the hat from his head. He chased it down the road and returned, gripping it tightly. I almost told him then. I told him that I and my parents, my grandparents, had been all born into bondage, and that my great grandparents have been kidnapped from their homes and forced into slavery, while his great grandparents decided which crops to plant and what to name their new cow. I wanted to tell him, to convince him that how wrong-headed he was. If you were that tall fellow back there, I asked, wouldn't you want to be free and live your own life? I don't like talking about this, he said, but since you ask, no. If I were that fellow, I'd be happy for the food and clothes and the good care that my master gave me. I would know that God wanted me to be in bondage, and I would not question his will. The wind blew down a narrow strip of dirt between us, sending dust into the air, giving me the answer I needed. You are not my friend, I said.